Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. This is Football at 4.
And Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by PropSwap, America's sports betting marketplace. Sell your sports bet, take your profit, find out how. Go to PropSwap.com, download the PropSwap app today. Speaking of PropSwap and downloading the app and prop swapping, the odds for Super Bowl 57 have been released, and obviously that means this season is over. Super Bowl odds for next year, the odds to win. The Kansas City Chiefs are your favorite, and they are 5-1, the odds to win the Super Bowl. So they are the new odds for next season. Buffalo is number 2. The L.A. Rams are number 3. Cincinnati comes in at number 4. They are 11-1. Dallas is number 5 at 14-1. San Francisco's 14-1. So what you can do is buy one of these odds right now if you see a team that you think is going to be making moves this offseason, and you can, of course, prop swap that. We'll talk more football now. Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast, Football at 4. And I'm sure, Mosher, it's a sad night when the Super Bowl is over, and that means the season is over. But we do like the offseason, the build, the climb. And both those teams, the build, the climb was drastically different between Cincinnati and L.A.
Yes, they were. They were very different. And I heard you talking earlier, and it's it'll be interesting. I agree with you. I think we talked about it last week, just about the climb for being different for both. And the Bengals are not guaranteed to be there every year. When you play in the same division as the Steelers and the Browns, as the Steelers and the Ravens, who tend to be very good organizations that are not down for long, then it's always going to be kind of a tough fight. And of course, the Browns haven't been great, but over the last few years, they've been better. They've been gradually acquiring talent, getting better coaching. So I doubt there'll be a pushover next year. So it's very clear what the Bengals have to do this offseason with their offensive line and get it together. But even that won't guarantee them anything.
Yeah, I said earlier, if I'm Howie Roseman, the first call I make is to Cincinnati. Hey, I have Andre Dillard. Do you have any interest? I mean, he's got 5 guys, backups, that are probably more attractive than what Cincinnati threw out there last night. Like if they went with Nate Herbig, Andre Dillard, Brett Toth, Jack Anderson, and Suo Opeta, they probably would have had a better effort last night.
Yeah, probably could have. Dillard would be tricky because he's probably the Eagles' best kind of trade bait for offensive line, but because he can only play left tackle, and that happens to be the one position where the Bengals are pretty good at, they really need a right tackle. That guy, what was his name? Isaiah Prince. He's not very good. Their right guard was not very good. Their left guard and center are adequate. So, I would be on the phone with anybody I could be, including the Eagles, seeing what it would cost to get me certain guys. Because they have to be aggressive, I would think, in both free agency and the draft.
Yeah, now, I mean, last night, obviously, it's a celebration of the sport. And really, you look at the teams, you see the Rams, and they win the game the way they did. I'm interested, Moshe, like, if you get an opportunity or if you have talked to some front office people about the way the Rams did it, like, are we going to see teams now pushing all their chips in saying, let's go for this?
Well, I have talked to some people in high positions in the NFL, not since the Super Bowl, but in general, since the Rams made some of their trades. And I think that they're unilaterally supported because the trades that they made that involved giving up first-round picks were not for rental players. They're going to have Matthew Stafford for a long time. They're going to have Jalen Ramsey for a long time. So I think that they would say they would resist the temptation of saying the Rams went all in just for 2022. They went all in with their first-round picks on players who they think are going to give them a long future. Now, obviously, Von Miller may not be back, and he's a big part of it. But really, what they gave up the most prices for were Stafford and for Ramsey in successive years, and those guys will still be a part of the team going forward. And then it's all part of that kind of analytical game of, did you think the Rams, if they didn't make these moves, were going to be picking in the top half of the first round or the bottom half of the first round? Well, the bottom half of the first round, the hit percentage on those guys being good starters or Pro Bowlers is so much lower than the top half of the first round. It really starts to take a dip after, say, that 13, 14, 15 range. And some drafts you've seen, and we go back to that Lane Johnson one, right, where you can go after Lane. It wasn't a very good draft, but you'll see that after you go out of the top 10, it's not so good. So I think the message in there is if you're going to give up first round picks and you give it up for proven Pro Bowl elite talent, that's a good move because you're getting proven young Pro Bowl elite talent for your first round pick.
Geoff Mosher, Inside the Birds podcast, Super Bowl 56. There were there was a lot of plays in that game. Donald's play to me is just the most memorable thing ever. Like, it's reminiscent of Mike Jones tackling Kevin Dyson from the goal line. I mean, he's got the guy by the waist, Moshe, a grown man by the waist, and he's on his ass, and he's holding him from moving to get a first down. And it's like, man, you're a grown man, you're an NFL player, and all you need is just to get another yard. And Aaron Donald was that strong to prevent you. Like, to me, that moment stands out of why they won that game.
It's not often you see a defensive tackle simultaneously shed a block and make the tackle at the same time. It's usually a step one, step two process. Like, I shed my block, that put me in position to then make a head-up tackle on someone. In that case, he was shedding the block while making the tackle at the same time, with almost using one hand to shed the block, the other hand, as you said, to kind of wrap around and make the tackle and pull a guy backward. You just have to be some kind of superhuman to be able to pull that off. And I think I heard you say this earlier, and I'm in total agreement. I asked myself the same question at the end of the game. Who do I really think is the MVP of this game? And if you're really being fair and not just looking at offensive statistics, I do think that Aaron Donald should have been the MVP of that game.
Oh, there's no doubt. And I did admit, I didn't bet on Donald. I bet that a defensive lineman would be named, mainly thinking that Donald was going to win it.
Sure.
And I accidentally bet it twice, to be honest with you. I didn't.
Ouch.
Not a lot of money or anything, but I was like, at the end of the day, I'm like, hey, I just kind of ass backward myself into a couple $100. There's no way he's not getting this thing.
I missed on two pretty good parlays, like 5-leg parlays, and both of them had all I needed was Joe Burrow to scramble for 12 yards, and he only got 3,
yep.
3 or 4.
I had a 10-teamer, and the one that I didn't get was Joe Burrow, 12 yards, and Mixon, 29.5 yards receiving, because I figured they would be down and they would be dumping him the ball late in the game.
Yeah.
Everything else I nailed.
Their whole use of running backs in that game, specifically the 2 times that Samaje Perine got the ball instead of Joe Mixon.
Why would they give Perine the ball on 3rd down and 1 there?
It's that classic overthinking. If I have Joe Mixon out there, they're going to be focused on him. But if I have Perine out there, maybe they're thinking I'm passing. It's that classic Super Bowl overthinking it. You got a great talent. Joe Mixon's a really good running back. He's kind of unheralded in the league, but he's not the best or top 3, but he's really good. And I thought he actually made some pretty tough yards in that game in the few carries that he did get.
Oh, I thought Mixon. By the way, that was another prop that I had. Joe Mixon, more than 10 yards rushing in the first quarter. And he had that 12-yard run right at the end of the quarter. And I was like, bam, there I go. There's a nice hundo to start the day off right for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's nice. Good stuff there.
Yeah, and then, so I that's why I couldn't believe they didn't give Mixon the ball in that situation. But no, in reality, I talked about this earlier, Moshe. I ripped the Bengals on draft day because they didn't take a lineman. They had a chance to get, and look, I can't fault them for taking Chase, and they went to the freaking Super Bowl. But at some point, not having an offensive line is going to catch up to you, and it caught up to them in the biggest game. And the biggest thing is, like you said, it could catch up to them in future seasons unless they hit on some of these guys, because you can't keep going through getting this guy hit 50, 60, 70 times a season.
And one of the more perplexing things is that Mike Brown, who has not been a great owner, it's not like he's one of these like billionaire kids who inherited a team and wouldn't know how to run a football franchise. I mean, my Lord, he's the son of Paul Brown. He played football himself, Mike Brown, not at the NFL, I think in college. So you would think between his dad and his own pedigree, he would have a pretty elementary understanding that you need to have a good offensive line if you're going to, have a quarterback like Joe Burrow. And they went out in free agency and bought more players than teams traditionally do when they make the Super Bowl. And yet not much on the offensive line there. It's shocking to me. And if they don't do it this offseason, then ouch. Then too bad for Cincinnati fans. It'll be another rough few decades, I guess.
What'd you think of the Bengals game plan last night?
I thought both teams were really conservative, Mike.
Yeah.
Especially when Zach Taylor, went for on fourth down, didn't get it. These are conservative coaches anyway. So it didn't surprise me. Adam and I talked about it on the Inside the Birds podcast. I kind of like Super Bowls where both coaches are aggressive. In this case, it was the opposite.
You did have a Mixon touchdown pass, and you had a Cooper Kupp throw.
Yeah.
You know what's funny? Talk about prop
those plays these days are not almost that unconventional anymore.
You're holding them for that day. It's funny. There was a guy at the party I was at last night, and he had bet that somebody else other than a quarterback would throw a pass, not a touchdown, just a pass. And when Mixon threw the touchdown, I said, yeah, the holder threw a pass. You had already won the bet because the holder. Now, you know that guy, okay?
Uh-huh.
The guy misses that extra point. Think about all the people who had 4-0 in their block pools. They would have won the halftime and the final game, which is typically the biggest two payouts of block pools. So that happened last night. The two guys are in the house, right? And the guy who had 4 zeros there and the guy who has 3 zeros there. And the guy misses the extra point. If I told you how much money that guy lost last night.
It's a rough one.
Okay. I'm gonna put it over here in this private chat, then you can take a look at it, okay?
Okay.
I want to hear your reaction live on the air. This is how much the guy lost because of that extra point.
No, my God. Are you serious?
I swear. I swear to God.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. Okay. Here's the breakdown, okay? Boom.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Betting is bad, folks. I mean, it's great, but it's bad.
Yeah.
Oh, man. That's
Can you
rough.
imagine? Can you imagine? All because the holder. All because the holder dropped the ball.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh,
so,
boy.
Yeah, I want to get your thoughts on. By the way,
I don't feel so bad now about not getting that parlay because I didn't get 13 yards out of Burrow.
I'm like, hey, I put $10 down on Mixon getting 10 yards in the first. Actually, it was 50. It was 50 to win 100. It was nice. It was one of those odds boosts. Are the Rams here to stay? Do they have staying power? Are they going to be good?
Well, they're also in a tough division too, Mike. I mean, they were the 3rd seed, and they had they lost 6 straight games to the 49ers until they beat them in the playoffs. And if Trey Lance is as good as the 49ers think he is, and if he's 20% better than Jimmy Garoppolo, 49ers are going to be a pretty tough team. Obviously, the Seattle Seahawks, if they keep Russell Wilson, and they've been successful with and without Russ, I mean, they're a good organization. They're not going to be a pushover, and I don't think the Cardinals will be. And obviously, they're going through some kind of, issues with Kyler Murray right now. But the bottom line is, Kyler doesn't have much leverage unless he just says, "I'm never playing for you again." And I don't know if he's ready to do that. So I much like what we talked about with the Bengals, this is not like the AFC East where the Patriots got hand delivered 5 to 6 wins a year, just by playing the Jets, the Bills, and the Dolphins. So it would not surprise me at all. In fact, if you gave me like a handicap on it or something, a betting odds, I would probably lean toward neither of these teams being in next year's Super Bowl as opposed to one or both of those teams being in the Super Bowl.
I kind of agree. Beckham ACL, you don't know what he's going to do when he comes back. You talked about the quarterbacks. This offseason is going to be wild, don't you think? Now this Wentz thing, what happens with Wentz? I mean, does Wentz have the personality to put his tail between his legs and enter in training camp entrenched as somebody's backup?
Well, that would only happen if the Colts release him, because then you get to sign him to whatever contract you want. If a team trades for him and takes on what I think is going to be like $25 million for the year, then they're going to start him as their quarterback. And
well, if a team says we're going to release or trade you, does anybody trade for you knowing that you're going to be on the open market?
Yes, because then if on the open market, you have to compete with people who may have more money than you. If you trade,
okay, is he a hot commodity? If he was available, do you think teams are knocking down the door to sign Carson Wentz at this point?
I don't think he's at the point yet where he's an unwanted guy who's going to have to prove himself. I think he's still, only because the league is so deficient at the position, there's always going to be like 2 or 3 teams that convince themselves, hey, you know what? Just like the Colts did, right? If we can bring Carson Wentz here on a 1-year deal, like we got enough money for 1 year to at least take that shot. That with our defense, with our run game, maybe it's the Steelers thinking that. I doubt it, but I'm just saying there's always going to be a team that thinks that way, and will probably look to bring him in.
I'd be how cool would it? I don't want to say cool, but what if it was Washington?
That would be pretty cool, wouldn't it?
Right, to have him in the division playing for Washington. I don't know, man. To me, like, I'm no Wentz hater. I'm shocked at how. He wasn't horrible this year. I mean, I'm pretty surprised that they've just said we're going to release or cut the guy or trade the guy. Like how it got to that point. Is it just monetary, or do they think he stinks?
Well, I think one thing is that their general manager, Chris Ballard, really good guy. Met him a couple times. Very, very forthright. He's got like that no BS type meter going on, and you heard him in his postseason press or end of season press conference. He was clearly mad and disappointed about how the season ended, about how Carson played at the end of the year. And while he didn't say it, I think you have to wonder if he was really mad that Carson had to miss a lot of practice at the end of the year from the COVID list. If I'm not mistaken, he was out of practice and then all of a sudden got cleared right up to that last game and then played the game basically with no week of practice, no week of being out there. And then I think earlier in the year, he was also on the list, so had to miss it because he was a close contact. So, I sense that in general, Chris Ballard was very disappointed in Carson Wentz for how the season ended. There was a time during the year where Frank Reich even came out and said, look, if you're going to make those left-handed throws or those crazy cowboy throws, you're going to have to take the heat when they go awry or if you get picked off or if we don't win. So it does sound like it was a trying year for at least a trying finish to the year, because it did seem like the Colts were locked into a playoff spot with about a week or 2 left. And the way things ended seemed to really tick off everyone from the coach to the GM to the owner.
Last thing for Geoff Mosher, Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com. Any news on Jason Kelce's offseason? I guess he will be one guy we're going to be keeping an eye on.
Yeah, I've heard him do some interviews, and he's almost played both sides of the fence. He's talked about always wanting to be removed from the end of the year to really give him an unbiased consideration to it. And I've heard him say that it's the mind always wants to. It's how the body, the body tells him whether he can or can't. So it sounds like he's going to give it a go. But the fact that he was saying that this past year was going to be his last year makes you realize that it's close with him. So this year coming up, if he decides to play, very well could be his final year. And if he does decide to play, the Eagles and Howie and everybody involved have to kind of get to work to redo the contract, or else they're going to have to pay him $30 million this year. And while he's a great player and a great guy, I'm pretty sure they don't want their center taking up a $30 million hit on their salary cap. So we'll have to see what happens there.
Absolutely. All right, Geoff Mosher. Tomorrow, Quentin Michael will be in here for Football at 4. He's one of the hosts of the Q&A show, which you can get on the Inside the Birds platform. Jeff's back on Wednesday, Andrew here on Thursday, and Adam Kaplan Friday. That's your lineup for Football at 4 this week here on the Sports Bash. Geoff Mosher, you're a gentleman and a scholar.
Neither, but thank you for saying that. I appreciate it.
Take care, man.
Have a good one.
That is the Sports Bash, Football at 4. Yes, Quentin Michael will be a part of Football at 4 tomorrow. You'll hear from Quentin Michael, Jason Avant, Geoff Mosher, Adam Kaplan, Andrew DeCecco, all off season long for Football at 4.